Welcome back to Gale Force Wins Season 4.
Well, folks, welcome back to Gale Force Wins. We are here in my home studio. This is a Tuesday night inspirational podcast. What does that mean? Well, a lot of people ask me, Jerry, how do you guys make money? Well, we started off on Tuesday nights doing inspirational podcasts, and it morphed into content creation. How we make our money, and this is a shameless plug, Matt, wait for me. We make our money by going to conferences and trade shows. So if you know of anyone or any company, or you're an owner of a company, we can either embed in your booth, or like last week, we were at DefSec. It was our 4th year. We actually took over the show and podcasted from the show. We shoot, edit, and post in the moment. Anyway, that's enough about that. The guest we have here today, who will be on one of our Tuesday Night Inspirational podcasts, I met down at TIR, actually at the Alt Hotel. That's where I tend to work. And if you follow my LinkedIn, you'll see that I tend to work down there a lot when I need to do editing. So I want you to introduce yourself, let everyone know who you are, and then the conversation is going to unfold from there.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Jerry. This is a cool setup you got here. I'm a little bit jealous of all the gear, but my name is Matt Howlett. I am 43, born and raised in Newfoundland. I've lived away for a fair bit, but came back for a visit just like 2 years ago and met my now wife. So I live here now.
Yeah.
Again. And it's weird to talk about yourself. You're going to have to ask me questions, I think, to get it out of me.
Well, that's the way we started. We just get you going. So you grew up in Newfoundland. We're going to go right back to the beginning. You grew up in
Mount Pearl.
Mount Pearl.
Yeah.
So what part of Mount Pearl were you in?
Up by O'Donnell, so
Yeah.
like Ruth Avenue and Old Central Road. I actually worked at that Wendy's Tim Hortons for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Shout out to all my Tim Hortons Wendy's peeps.
Yeah.
What was his last name? Don. Oh, the owner. Really liked me.
I knew,
I remember that. I remember when he gave me a letter of reference. This is completely random, Jerry. But
yeah.
He
That's
gave
right.
me a letter
We
of
were
reference.
Okay with completely random.
Yeah, he gave me a letter of reference. I remember Mom reading it because I would have been like 17 at the time, and she's like, "Matthew, this is like a really good reference." I'm like, "Okay." I don't really know what to do at that time.
How old were you when you worked there?
It was my first job after a paper route, so probably like 17.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really remember for sure, but
I worked at McDonald's, and I will tell you, I only lasted 3 months, and I really struggled with that.
Oh,
But it was my first job.
yeah.
Yeah.
You get a lot of good experience working in the service industry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's you can learn a lot from that.
So did you go to O'Donnell?
No, actually, no. I grew up in a Christian home, so I got shipped off to Vader's.
Yeah.
I don't mean for it to sound bad. Vader's wasn't a terrible experience, get shipped off, but like this is the other part of town,
Yeah.
right? It's not even Mount Pearl. So
Yeah.
Vader's is now Larry's Brook out by the Avalon Mall. So we, hopped on a school bus.
Yeah.
And so I did junior high straight through high school, except for grade 3, because in grade 3, I actually lived on Penmore Drive. So Mount Pearl, more of like down by Coleman's, that area. And went to a French immersion school that doesn't exist anymore.
Wow.
It's that big empty parking lot, if
Yeah.
anybody knows, down off Park Avenue. Yeah.
So are you full
Not a parking
bilingual?
lot.
Are you,
No, I am absolutely not bilingual.
well, you went to French immersion
I
school.
went to French immersion in grade 3. That was it. I don't remember if we didn't like it or if Mom just preferred the idea of us staying at Vader's.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been odd for us to be, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2 at Vader's. You're getting into that rhythm of going to school, meeting people, and then getting pulled out of that for a year. So I really don't know. But yeah, I am not bilingual.
So I'm going to ask you a question now, similar thing to me, but I'll tell you about that in a second. So you go to Vader's. It's not in Mount Pearl.
Yeah.
That's not easy for you to do because you have no friends, I would imagine, at school, or did you?
Honestly, I don't know if I did at the start. Like, I don't know what came first, whether I met them in the neighborhood or whether I met them at school. But I would have known some of them from church, right? Because that's, you grew up in that world. We went to church a couple times a week, right?
Yeah.
Twice on Sundays. There was a midweek program. And then when I got a little older, there was a weekend program. So there was a couple guys in that area that I did know, but I don't know how I met them. You know what I mean? I don't know if we met them through like mom's friends and whatever, but one of my better friends, her and her sister, we kind of grew up together, but they went to Vaders too, but they lived in like the Kilbride.
So you went kindergarten up from that school, did you?
Straight up, yeah, just for that, except for grade 3, which was the French immersion school that doesn't exist anymore, yeah.
Well, my story was my mother moved us. So when my dad died, I always joke, and I never said this in front of her, but she got her own way and put us in St. Bon's. That's what she wanted.
Okay.
So I was in grade 6. So I'm 11 years of age. I already had friends at Mary Queen of Peace. And then she plucked us out of there and moved us to St. Bon's. But you know what? And I did resent her for quite a while over that. But then in reflection, now that I'm 58, that was the first pivot in my life.
Really?
So you know what? It's my mother prepared us for a change, and I didn't realize it, man. You know, now in retrospect that she's gone, I'm like, wow, that wasn't easy for her to do. It wasn't easy for me to go through, or my brother. Yeah. But anyway, that was a pivot. So you're at Vaders, and you're in school, and you're a good student. What are you? Give us a little idea.
I mean, I wasn't a bad student. I didn't love school. I mean, I put in, I suppose, enough work. I'd probably have to say I'm average.
Yeah.
I remember skipping a few math exams. I remember being like decent at math because like back in the day, I think if you got like an 85 average or above, I think that's what the case was. You didn't have to do the final. But no, I mean, I wasn't, I was average. Yeah. There wasn't even a subject really that stuck out to me because I specifically remember the struggle of like grade 12. What are you going to do next? Right. All those questions and going to the counselor at that time, Anthony was his last name. And I just took a basic like aptitude test, which did not help me whatsoever. Cause it's just like, oh, you know, you'd be good as a cop or you'd be good at this or that, you know, give me a couple options, none of which really resonated with me at the time. And I think actually that's when I did start that job at Tim Hortons Wendy's. Because I didn't know what I was going to do after high school. And I ended up working for a year and not really knowing. I took a couple courses online in the winter semester after I graduated high school. But just feeling out, had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, and I asked that question because as I get to know my nephew, I have a nephew who said to me one day, he goes, he had some trouble with work, right? And I was telling him that, you know, I was in the Navy and I failed out of a program, got sent home from British Columbia, very difficult. You know what he said to me? He's 22. He goes, "You failed at something." And it was so shocking to me that he didn't realize, because he saw all these older people in his life as having all this success, houses and cars and all that, and had no idea that we have had our failures too. So, you know, if someone has gone through school and it was a challenge, then I think we need to tell people, you know, because we're not all brilliant, are we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, that's one of the core things to what I believe in and what I do now. I mean, authenticity. And that's even, I don't know if we were recording at that point, but you were saying that that's what this is all about.
It is.
Just being real with people, right? Getting the real story, getting whatever it is that actually happened. And you know what I mean? The idea of the person that you're talking to on camera or audio, whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, let me back it up. And I mean, that's something that we really believe in, because that's what life's all about, you know. There's too many people in the world, on social media in particular, and I know you're going to tell them more about your journey where you are now, but I think that the inauthenticity of advertising in particular is it's pervasive. Not only that, social media and people taking a picture of themselves and telling everyone that everything's perfect when it's not. Yeah. You know, that's why I find, you know, and we're 4 years into this journey, Matt, now at Gale Force Wins, and just telling the story of people is really important. Anyway, I'm rambling, but so back to you. So you're in Vaders, and tell us a little bit more about your educational journey. Let's talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, sure. The 3 courses that I mentioned, again, I grew up in church. The 3 courses that I mentioned were related to that whole world. They were a Old Testament history course, so like biblical Old Testament history, and music course, and I can't remember what the third one was. So I was just like feeling it out because I had a bunch of opportunities at the church that I grew up in. It started with music, I believe. I think that was the first thing I did. I did some leadership stuff with like children and whatever, but the thing that really first started to resonate with me was in music, and then I was doing some like live audio stuff. And so I just thought, why not, right? I'll check out this Bible college, these courses that I took, and they were fine. I don't remember them being anything that got me overly excited at the time. And then that kind of just led into a 1-year course. And that was at a different school. I had heard of this place in Edmonton. At the time, it was called Northwest Bible College. Now it's called Vanguard College. So I did a 1-year program there. Again, just feeling it out. It felt like, the opportunities that I had, the roles that I was filling at the church, just made sense. So I'm like, okay, why don't I check that out? So I did that.
How old were you at this point?
That was 19. Yeah. So at 19, I did that 1-year program. So that was like a certificate, but then I chose to roll that into a 4-year degree. So my undergrad is in theology with a major in music. And as I was going through that program, that's kind of when I started to get the idea of, this whole idea of becoming a pastor feels right to me. It makes sense to me. Like I deeply care about people, and I think like that whole authenticity piece is a big part of that, because I want to get to know people, right? I want to be able to help. I want to be able to understand and show them that I understand, accept them for who they are. All the stuff that's part of that piece. But yeah, I finished that program. That felt right, and so that's where the education kind of started, I suppose, after high school. But after that, there was a master's in communications and another certificate in like new media that I did before the master's. So a few different things, yeah, figuring it out.
So you finally finish your education.
Yeah.
And then you get employed, and you stayed in Alberta? Is that what you did?
No.
No?
So after the theology degree, I pastored in Alberta for a year while I was a student, but then I moved home once I finished that undergrad, and I pastored in Newfoundland. So I did youth care for 3 years. That was kind of my paid gig so that I could work at a church as a volunteer. I helped to plant a church, to start a new church in Paradise, which is now called Spruce Hills Community Church.
I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Yeah, so that's been on the go for a while now. That started in 2005, the fall that I came home. A group of, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 of us that were like the core crowd, and great group of people. Did a lot of cool things there, and to see that grow, that was a lot of fun. And I used to tell people that was the best 3 years of my life, up until, I don't know, maybe 2021. That was probably the best 3 years of my life. Just good people, you're doing good work that you really believe in, and that like you have responsibility that feels like it's fulfilling like the core of who you are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Putting
yourself out into the world. So I did that, and that was all before the master's. So I pastored here in Newfoundland for about 9 years, and then moved to Vancouver. And so that's when that certificate in new media started, and then eventually the master's in comms. But that's when I kind of left the whole church world. That's the last time I pastored. That's the last time I really did anything significant in a leadership role in church.
Was there any reason that you kind of walked away from that, or did you walk away entirely, or?
From the position of from pastoring, from vocational ministry, I mean, there were a couple reasons. Each one of those is probably a bigger conversation, but leaving pastoral ministry at that time, that was the end of that. I didn't go back to that, didn't want to go back to that, and several reasons for that. It's not that the work I was doing didn't feel right to me, but the setup in which I had to do it. And when I've been asked, I just did a podcast with a buddy of mine, John Hilliard. He calls his Tugboat Talks. He asked me the same question in a roundabout way. And honestly, I authenticity. I mean, that's really what it goes back to for me. I didn't see that as often as I would want to, and primarily in leadership. You know, I saw a lot of lack when it comes to integrity. Saying one thing, doing something different.
Yeah.
You know, what I would read in scripture, we didn't really follow through on. We would major on the minors. It would become too political. You'd be too worried about what people thought, making decisions based off of, like, you know, avoiding upsetting so-and-so or whatever, right? And it's not that as a pastor, you're constantly like correcting people, and that's not what it's about. But, you know, when there are situations where there is, what would you call it, challenges with like character flaws, or not really character flaws, but issues of character, right, that are consistent and that persist, they need to be addressed, as you would understand in any community. You know, if you were part of a community and you're constantly causing problems, you know, for the health of the greater community, and that's kind of the role of a pastor, right? But anyways, that's a conversation in of itself.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I'm interpreting the amount of effort required to keep at a consistent level. It must have been intense for you to be the best you could be in that particular environment.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure there, for sure. I mean, we used to talk about burnout a lot as a pastor, and I started as a student pastor, youth pastor. Then I took on a music role at the last church I was at. The church plant, I was primarily music and helped out with a few random things. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure there, and some of it can be self-imposed.
Yeah.
But it's unspoken as well, right? Like you have to portray. I'm not really sure how to word that, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like there is an expectancy is the word I'm trying to spit out, to be a certain way. And I'm a little bit more introverted, but that was the Pentecostal church. So that is traditionally more extroverted, more charismatic.
Yeah.
I've never been like that. So I always felt, I don't know, a bit of a struggle there to be a certain way, I suppose. But yeah, you're definitely right. There's definitely a lot of pressure there.
I'm going to delve into something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's music.
Yeah.
I'm actually a trumpet player in a jazz band, and I joke it's Jazz East, and Bill Brennan's the director. I don't know if you're familiar with the band. As anyone knows, I always tell everyone, "Oh, how's band going?" I said, "Well, I'm hanging on by my fingernails."
Jazz East?
Jazz East, yeah. It's a jazz band, 18-piece orchestra. Anyway, I did a business degree, and I was in Mon Jazz, so I've been around music for quite a while. What particular instrument did you go to music school or as well, or
no? I took I was at Mon just for like a course during my internship with Bible college, because I was actually here for my internship and just had to do a course at Mon. So no, I learned drums first. I learned everything basically by ear. A friend of mine, her dad, Bob Wiseman, used to play in the Masterless Men.
Yep.
Yeah, he gave me a couple guitar lessons at one point, but mostly I picked everything up by ear just from playing in church. So drums was first, guitar was after that. That ended up being my main instrument. And then in college, I had to learn piano to get up to grade 6 scale level in order to be able to like roughly teach a choir.
Yeah.
Because that was part of the program. But I didn't really love that aspect. I had no desire to teach a choir.
Yeah.
I more or less like the band component of that, right? Leading bands, being part of a band. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So yeah, you're finished with the church, and you go to Vancouver.
Yeah.
You're now graduated. You've got your comms degree, and
no, the new media certificate came first because I wanted to try something different. And that felt like something that made sense. I had always been like the creative, techie guy interested in that world. You know, it was a 1-year mashup of like, you know, communications, web design, and development, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there was a bit of even audio and video production in there as well. So
wow,
it was a good bit of fun.
That's pretty diverse. What was that at?
BCIT.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's I don't know if it's still called the new media program. It's longer than that. I'm forgetting the full name.
Yeah.
But I did that, and then just some life circumstances caused me to kind of, be a little nomadic for a while. And eventually I did the master's program started in fall of 2020. Yeah.
And that was the
fall
master's
of
in
2019.
Master's in what?
Communications, Royal Roads University in Victoria.
Very familiar with it.
Yeah?
Yes, I am. I actually
How
was
so?
employed at that particular location for a
No
summer.
way.
It's amazing, actually. When I was in the Navy, that Royal Roads was
Yeah.
actually run by the military.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any military presence there now at all?
Presents? I don't think so.
No.
No.
So yeah, when anyone mentions Royal Roads University, I was there in, it would have been 86, 87.
Geez, I don't know if the dorms have changed since then.
Well,
As
it's,
it was only fall, and
Yeah.
I remember that place being like a little cold.
yeah. Oh yeah, it's
pretty,
old.
pretty rough looking. Yeah,
That's
Clean,
cool though, eh?
but,
You don't realize, you're sitting down at an Alt Hotel with someone who went to a university that's pretty remote from St. John's, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I was
one
there.
coast or the other, man.
Yeah.
Like I've lived, I suppose, on the prairies. I mean, I was in Alberta for a couple of years going to school. I lived in Canmore for a while. Didn't really like dislike either of those places,
Yeah.
but I've always been like pulled one coast or the other.
Yeah.
Like being close to the water, near the ocean. Yeah.
So you get your master's degree in communications.
Yeah.
At what point now, like as soon as you graduate, did you get a job, or how? Tell us a little bit about that part of your journey.
No, so I had, when I started the comms degree, I was living in Canmore, Alberta. I was working on a startup there in the ag tech space, a hydroponic startup with a buddy of mine that I knew from Vancouver.
Your business, or
No, it was his idea with another friend of his before I lived there. I was living in Asia at the time. My mother got sick, eventually passed. I had moved home, and he had just told me what he was up to, kind of catching up, and said, well, we could definitely use your help. And I said, well, I don't really know what to do at this point. Well, I mean, I was wrecked. I
Yeah.
just lost my
Yeah.
mother from cancer, surprise diagnosis. I was separated at the time. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do at that point, because that was a surprise. I didn't plan to come home at that point. So yeah, I moved to Canmore, and after the master's degree, I actually went and lived in Victoria for a little while because I figured, why not? The business was kind of losing steam. We didn't get the funding that we needed, and so I left Canmore. And after I did the master's degree mainly because, again, I wanted to do something different. I wanted a degree that wasn't theology based. That was basically it. So I picked an area of interest,
yeah,
and just went ahead with that. I wasn't really planning on looking for a position in that field. I just wanted to do something that I was interested in at the grad level. But while I was in that program, that's when I started working with the lady I mentioned to you earlier, the ad agency based in Canmore that I'd met while I was in Canmore. So I've been working with her running meta ads since fall of 2020.
It's interesting, I mean, that's part of my background.
Yeah.
I managed people who ran the ads. So people say to me, oh, do you know how to do it? I know how. That's not necessarily that I did do the execution, right? Because in the company I was in, there was like 27 employees, worked in the digital space, and a lot of people doing it. But so basically you're delivering ads, geo-targeting ads through Facebook, essentially, is what you're doing.
Yeah, it's Facebook and Instagram. So
Yeah.
we manage the ad accounts for the clients. I suppose we go a little bit further than that because we can provide copy and the creative. We even extended maybe in the last year to getting into designing their websites, like their landing pages, their sales pages, even some email automation work. But we recently hired an internal copywriter. So I usually just kind of do the tech side, managing the ads, setting up the ads, optimizing performance, things like that.
That's a fascinating job you have, I got to tell you, because it's a bit of an
It
art,
can be.
an art and a science.
Yeah,
I know when you're in the middle of it, it's not as exotic, but
sadly,
on
it's
the
more
outside looking in,
science.
well, yeah,
I wish it was more art. And honestly, like I think we were chatting about this before you hit record, but the creative director is a buddy of mine. So a year and a half, and actually no, it was longer than that, maybe 2.5 years ago, we were using an online agency with workers that were like based primarily in Asia. They did good work, but their timelines were always a bit extended. And I was just saying to Rita, the lady who runs the agency, I'm like, why don't we just hire somebody internally?
Yeah.
Like the amount of money that we pay these guys, we're probably going to end up paying a little bit more, but we're going to get a return back on like shorter timelines. And, they didn't all speak English as a first language. So sometimes that was a challenge. So he actually is a buddy of mine that I just reached out to and, said, hey, look, we're looking for that. And so he does all that now.
Yeah.
So I used to do a little bit of that, which I did enjoy, but he's far better at it than I am.
Yeah.
Does it faster than I do. And so, but yeah, it's more science.
I think a lot of people, they'll boost a post, but I know from working in a digital agency myself, the value of having a professional do it. Tell us a little bit about the value proposition that you have.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite different. Just boosting a post is like you're basically, here, Meta, take my money and do something with this, right? Meta's not bad. Like what they learned from that pixel is, it's substantial. But to have someone in there daily, hourly, sometimes depending on what's going on, to be able to optimize that, to be able to have someone who understands copy, who understands the different options in Meta. There's a lot of defaults in Meta, and I basically turn off almost all of them just because they don't work the way that we would want them to work.
Yeah.
They often add music to posts, which I find super odd because it's kind of random. I remember a client's ad showing up on my own feed once, and this is back when they first started doing that, and I didn't realize it was a default. So she was doing a promotion. This was a coach that works with specifically with ADHD folks, and she was doing a promotion, I believe, about like something related to peace and tranquility and like finding that in your life, right?
Yeah.
But there was like dance music added to the back. And I remember showing up in my feed, right? And so immediately I jump on my computer, I go in and realize that these defaults are there. But I mean, that's just one of the many benefits that you get when you've got a professional managing your ads. Yeah.
What a great example, Matt. I mean, I've been at digital marketing. I actually started digital marketing in 1999 in St. John's. I was the first digital marketing guy. There was all kinds of stuff that we encountered, but that is a good example, folks, as to why you want a professional. I think hearing that is brilliant because what is it? It's wrong. It's wrong to have that type of music playing.
Yeah,
and digitally automating stuff does a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You're trusting the computer, right? You're trusting an algorithm to just do what it thinks is best, and it's not always right. It's not always wrong. It can definitely save you some time, but that one simple example was off-brand.
Yeah.
It was not the vibe that they were going for. It didn't match up with the copy. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't helpful at all. But I mean, there's tons of other reasons. Like, if I pop in one day and see that, a click-through rate has dropped, we can jump on that opportunity pretty quickly. I can get the creative director to spin up a different version of something based off of what I know has worked in the past. You know what I mean? So you really get into the weeds of it.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of A/B testing as well with different different pictures and titles and stuff?
Yeah, we do. Generally, when we get a new client, we work through like a message testing kind of process. We do that with creative as well. And then primarily, I'd say the split testing is more with pages. Mm-hmm. So it's like we'll make a copy of a sales page or a landing page and split the traffic to the two. Meta does a good job at that, has a default campaign set up for that. So, points to Meta for that one. But that's it.
I know we're geeking out a bit on the digital marketing thing. We're going to get more into your journey in a second, but I know there's a lot of business people that listen to this podcast and are interested in the marketing side of things.
Sure.
Whether you got to answer for this or not, I don't know, but I do a lot, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and some of the advertising that I get is in French. I'm pretty certain it has to do with the fact that my phone is in Montreal. I think it has something to do with the way Bell has it set up. So the targeting is off. But I think, what I really like about what you've said, you can determine, you would be able to see on a campaign whether something was delivered in the wrong language, would you not?
On a campaign, whether it was delivered like to
an audio campaign, now that would be, right?
Well, if I had like an English client with all English content and it was delivered to a French audience, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could definitely control that.
Yeah.
There's, settings for all kinds of demographics. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, as I said to you, I do get French ads on my Spotify, and it kills me because someone has invested in that ad. and it's being wasted, and I hate waste, you know? So,
That's funny. You and I are very similar that way, because I remember getting an ad for a company that I had already bought their thing, and I actually commented on the ad. I don't know
yeah,
if that's just me being anal or me
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
be nice or a combination of both. But I said, "Boy," I was like, someone's wasting your money because I shouldn't get this ad. I already bought this thing, and I wouldn't like this was a thing that you
yeah,
wouldn't want two of. And I'm just like, well, and that's where a professional comes in. Like you would exclude that audience,
yeah, yeah.
right? You would set up an audience that is automatic, whether or not someone has made a purchase or landed on a page or whatever, right?
I think, listen, you know, I'm biased because I've made my whole career in marketing, but people have said to me, oh, I find it so creepy, you know, I'm looking for shoes, and all of a sudden all kinds of shoe ads come to me. And I'm like, why do you find that creepy? You're in the
Yeah,
market for shoes.
exactly. Yeah,
The advertising algorithms are working as they should
yeah,
and delivering you timely information.
it's actually
So
helpful. I like it. You know what
I
I mean?
like it
Like,
too, but maybe you and I are just two advertising geeks. But I think, and then people around me, and I say that my wife has mentioned to me, you know, if she's looking for a purse and you start getting purse ads, that to me is effective advertising, as opposed to when I started in advertising, the telegram was it. So basically, you put 5 grand into a full page, and it's a shotgun blast into the
yeah,
dark.
yeah.
Now
I
it's
used to deliver
very
telegrams.
precise,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Digital marketing can be very precise, and again, that goes back to your point about professional marketing and the difference between like a boosted
Yeah.
post and giving your money to a professional to do something with it. But
Well, I think, yeah, you're right. With boosted posts, I mean, you're sitting there and you're doing concentric circles, and then it's the behaviors are not necessarily picked up on and all that. But
yeah,
anyway, we'll move off the advertising topic, and because you're currently that's what you're doing. Tell me a little bit about the other interest in your life that you mentioned to me that you've started.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's my passion project, right? I mean, that's what I feel. My psychologist used to talk about life's work, and he was actually the first person I've ever heard that used that phrase, that term, and that's what the Akkeri is for me. And it came from what I don't know, a period of just about 10 years of my life of just really having to let go of some things that I thought that were true, some things that I had based my life upon up to that point. Like, obviously I grew up in a church context and eventually kind of walked away, not just from my role, which I thought I was going to do for the rest of my
Yeah.
life, right? But that worldview has changed and shifted, and I've let a lot of that go. I haven't been part of a church in years, and I don't consider myself. I don't know. That's another conversation. I don't know if I consider myself a Christian anymore. But the point being that I had to walk away from that to an extent. I went through a separation and eventual divorce during that 10-year period. I changed careers a couple different times, lived in several different places. There were for that period of about 9 to 10 years, I didn't live in any one place for more than a year. And that's not because I had to move. I just was, going through different experiences, like, come back from Asia because my mother got sick and passed, heard about this opportunity that I mentioned to you in Canmore and thought, why not? Right. And then when that started to like kind of fizzle out, I thought, okay, well, why not check out Victoria? I'm doing a program there. So the Akkeri to me is passing on what I've learned from that 10-year period of.
Spell that for us.
Yeah, Akkeri. Thank you, because that is not English. It's a Norse word for anchor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's Akkeri as the pronunciation.
Yeah. Anchor.
Yeah, it's a Norse word for anchor.
Great. What a great concept. Anchor. Tell us a little more about the inspiration for Akkeri.
Yeah, well, that's fitting. I think so, because to me, self-knowledge, self-work, that is your anchor. Like if you do not know yourself, if you do not have a basic understanding of emotions and feelings and how to process them, how to develop habits that are helpful and help you to stay on that path of learning about yourself, because we change all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we go through experiences like I did in that period of 10 years that are very challenging. There was a period of 6 months within that where I didn't want to live anymore, and that is a really difficult thing for people to walk through. One of my buddies asked me, like, if I had a plan, trying to figure out whether or not I was serious. And I'm just like, man, no, like I'm probably not going to end my life, but like that's what I feel like at that time, right? So the Akkeri to me is my way of taking all of that, encapsulating that into coaching and educational courses to help men who may or may not be in that same situation work that out or avoid that altogether. Because I really think you can. I like to picture it as if I had, if 28-year-old Matt, 32-year-old Matt is kind of when this period started. If 32-year-old Matt had 43-year-old Matt, just once a month even, to bounce ideas off, to shoot the shit with, and to just kind of, talk about life.
Yeah.
Where would I be right now? I don't take back anything that I've been through. I don't regret any decisions that I've made. But I would be in a different spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would be, for lack of a better term, further ahead.
Yeah.
I think you can avoid some things. You know what I mean? And you can definitely be in a better spot, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, when you have somebody who has been there and done that. Sort of like the conversation we had about advertising.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a very different thing to do ads on your own, to boost a post, and just to guess. You know what I mean? And I think that's what a lot of us men do. And I speak from my own experience primarily. I grew up with parents that were divorced. My father was in the picture, but he didn't have a father himself. He came from a massive family. I believe it was 17 children. Probably didn't.
Shit. 17.
Yeah.
I've got 2, and I can't even imagine having 3.
Yeah. Well, I can't imagine these big, old Newfoundland Catholic families, right? Just like, and again, my grandmother on that side of the family was like a small human. And my wife now, and I often joke because she met her. She met my grandmother on my father's side years ago, oddly enough. But yeah, I primarily grew up without a father.
Yeah.
He was in the picture, but he wasn't like a father. You know what I mean? Like he didn't do the things that I would think a father should do. Loved me, did his best. But there was lack.
Yeah.
There was need there for more. My mother did the best she could, but it's difficult.
Yeah.
And even when you have the best setup, when you have a father who's present, and when you have even good male role models, you're a father yourself. I'm sure you've seen the challenges in raising your son, right? Like it's not easy, and I think it's harder even now than when I grew up or when you grew up, because the challenges are greater. You've got devices in your pocket that you can access just about anything. Some things that are, probably more, what's the word, like malevolent than others. Like, you know what I mean?
I agree, yeah.
And some things that are more addictive than others.
Well, look at the schools. They just, the schools now, my wife's a teacher, all the phones are in the lockers in her school. Anyway.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She did say to me, she said, you know what? She thinks the kids are actually enjoying it, despite the fact it took a while. It's hard for them initially, but being away from that device, it's good. My wife and I had a chat about it the other day in terms of the amount of FaceTime, or not FaceTime, screen time that we have on this. Absolutely astounding how much time is spent on these things by me. I'm a 58-year-old guy. I mean, now I am working in the digital industry. Yeah. But anyway, back to your point though about family and stuff. It resonates with me because my dad died when I was 14, and I never had a male role model in my life until I was probably around 26.
Oh,
and I
years.
Get what you're saying about feeling like you're behind. I was 29, and I took a bit of criticism from someone recently that said to me, what if, you're 29, that's pretty late to leave your house. And I'm like, yeah. You know what my response to that is? I was there to help my mom. She was 43 when Dad died. And I don't regret any moment of leaving my house a little late.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that I think I was probably 5-6 years behind everyone else in terms of, taking on the bills and everything.
Sure.
So, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's kind of my story.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are thousands of different setups, contexts that men grow up within. But I think the bottom line is that we are better together. We are better when we have older men to look up to learn from, to bounce ideas off, and then even younger men to mentor ourselves. Because I think you need both. I mean, you need the opportunity to share what you're learning, but even more than that, you need someone to bounce ideas off of. And like just even to your point there a minute ago, talking about how the devices and technology can draw us in. Like I did my master's thesis on the concept of belonging. Specifically, I looked at first year students during the pandemic at UBC, because that's where I was at the time. I was in Vancouver and I wanted to be able to talk to them face to face. But
One of the nicest campuses in Canada, by the way,
yeah,
UBC. But anyway,
yeah. Well, sadly, I wasn't studying there. Right? I was at the online
yeah,
program
yeah.
at Royal Roads, and I'd been on the campus, beautiful spot. But yeah, I did the master's thesis on the concept of belonging and whether or not these young men could actually achieve that when they're fully online, and they had expected to be in person. So obviously you've got that disappointment of your first year, your university experience, supposed to be like the best years of your life. People joke about that. And that concept just, it means so much to me, that concept of belonging, but also what provides that sense of belonging, and how the devices sometimes can support that, but often pull us away from being present in the moment.
Yeah.
Like I remember a study when I was writing the thesis that showed like a solid difference in sense of belonging between friends when there was even a phone present on the table at like a night out, or like even here in this situation, right? Just because they know that at any moment that person who may or may not check their phone often could get pulled away from a text or an email, or whatever's going on social, right? And it's true. I like the idea of having phones in boxes to schools.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah. So you've got the business started. It's the passion project. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about, first of all, how it works. Tell us a little bit about how what you're doing works.
Yeah, well, the Akkeri right now provides one-on-one coaching, and we have courses in development. So the first course that we are working on right now, and I keep saying we because I'm working on this with my wife, Dana. She's a trained clinical counselor, works at MUN at the moment. But we are working on a course. So all of this was delivered online.
Yep.
So one-on-one coaching courses all through online portal. But the first course that we're working on that we're very excited about is a course on self-compassion as the antidote to self-criticism. Because again, I'm focused primarily, well, only on men, and we are very hard on ourselves. You know what I mean? And that's something that came up a lot in my life. That's something that comes up in the conversations that I have with men. I'm actually going to be doing a conversation with a buddy of mine, John Hilliard, in the near future for the Akkeri podcast. I was on his a little while ago, Tugboat Talks, and he wants to talk about self-criticism. Because I was just said, man, like, we've known each other for a long time. What's been your challenges?
Yeah.
Talking about vulnerability and self-criticism. So yeah, it's just my way, like I said, of putting back what I've learned, what got me through that period, and what continues to keep me on a path that I want to be on, and just trying to help other men to do the same.
Let me ask you this. Someone said to me one time that self-depreciating humor is not humor you should ever engage in. And I do it. And I was kind of taken aback by that comment, because I actually find that I try to disarm other people. Because one of the things about me is that I'm really intense, because I've been hurt as a young person when Dad died, and I realize that every moment counts. And I struggle a little bit when the people around me kind of take life for granted, and that makes me really intense. So then to counter that, I have self-depreciating humor. What's your thoughts on self-depreciating humor? I
mean, I think I see your point. I think I see the risk. Self-deprecation I think can be different than self-criticism. It's different in habit, but self-deprecating humor, I'm thinking in the context of Newfoundland, right? We're very sarcastic people.
Yeah.
And I think that came from living in the harsh climate and whatever. I mean, I didn't grow up in that. But I think that our brains listen to the words that comes out of our mouths, and there is no filter. Our brains just hear them and can easily internalize them, and we wouldn't necessarily want that type of messaging to be internalized. I think that's your biggest risk with self-deprecating humor. Obviously, I don't know, context, the way that a person thinks and behaves factors into that. But I think that can easily slide into self-criticism because it is so easy, all too easy, to internalize things that should never be internalized, to actually believe the things that you're saying about yourself, even though it is joking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I've experienced that growing up here in Newfoundland. Like I said, we're very sarcastic people. And I actually remember a friend of mine having someone give that to her as feedback in the youth care context, and was suggesting that that type of humor and sarcasm isn't helpful. And so, yeah, you're probably not the only person that might think that way. And that was, back in 2005.
Yeah, Matt, I love the career and the decisions you're making in your life, and you've come by it very honestly, the twists and turns, and I can't think of anyone that would be more equipped to do what it is you're doing with the anchor. I think, well, it's true. I don't know you. We saw each other down at the Alt, as we said at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
But I think Newfoundland needs a little bit of a shakeup, frankly. There's too many people a little cavalier about what it is we're doing. And what I mean by that is, the Newfie joke. Frankly, I hate that. I hate the whole concept. I don't like the words. And
The Newfie joke?
no, I don't like it.
I'm not sure what you...
Well, anyone who, there's a lot of people that don't mind the word Newfie. They don't mind telling jokes about Newfoundlanders.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm kind of...
Just the idea that the term is like a pejorative. Like
Don't
it's a
like it at
negative.
all.
Okay. Yeah,
And you know what? I get it. Some people think it's okay. But my point, I guess, is that as a province, this is an amazing place in which we live. And I think we as individuals, men in particular, that's what we're talking about here right now.
Yeah.
And the Newfoundland man needs to change a little bit in some ways. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, you look at the statistics for young men and boys. We're at the highest risk for suicide. It's 45 to 5,000 people a year in Canada commit suicide. Higher numbers than that try, and it's 3 to 1 men to women, right? Like, I mean, that statistic alone, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right? And when you think of the people who are just thinking about that, like myself during that period of time that I mentioned, like that's a deep, dark place to be in. And it's not something that you should even try to navigate alone. And it's not something that men should have to go to. You know what I mean? As a place, like, mentally, spiritually, it shouldn't have to exist. And I think one of the biggest reasons is that there is stigma, obviously, around mental health challenges, around looking for help as a man. It's not masculine to look for help. I even feel that right now with practical things around the house that my wife and I recently bought. It's an older home. It needs a bit of love. And I am terrified by electricity. I've done projects with a previous home that I've owned.
I'm not terrified, but I probably should be.
Well, like, I just don't like it. I've never really been able to feel comfortable around it.
Yeah.
When I replaced my baseboard heaters at my first home with forced air, I shut off power for the entire house.
Yeah.
I did the work with a headlight, a headlamp.
Yeah, I get it.
Right? Just because I wanted to know that it was all off. And even me, I sometimes feel like it's not manly to ask for help. My brother-in-law has been so kind to help me, and he's got way more experience with that than I do. And I'm happy to have him there.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
No.
But still, you know what I mean? Even though I have that belief, I still have that, like, I guess another belief in me somewhere just mainly, I think, from, society
Yeah.
telling me that, oh, you should be able to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, listen, I know what you mean. I mean, I grew up with a brother who's, he's an infantry soldier. He's a sniper. He went to Afghanistan. He knows the woods. My boys find him fascinating. I don't know anything about that. So, I'm less manly in that area. But yeah, I mean, there are times when I'm wondering, maybe I should know more about that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think at my stage of my life, and I'm older than you, is that I've come to terms with a lot of what I know and what I don't know. And I don't struggle much with any of that anymore. There are times, though, I do feel, because of my self-depreciating ways, that I find people tend to take me for granted. And I do struggle with that a little bit, and it's probably my own fault for getting myself into that position where, the self-depreciating humor,
Right.
So I feel like I'm moving into a counseling session with you here now, which I'm not, I'm okay with.
But that's very much like a Western society type of thing, right?
Is it? Yeah.
Like to believe that our manliness, our masculinity is dependent on what we produce, on what we know, on what we can do. I would argue that it's based on who we are. It's based on our values, it's based on our character, it's based on how those elements of who we are then relay into our speech and relay into our actions. You know what I mean? I don't feel like less of a man because I want my brother-in-law's help to fix a few electrical things in the house. You know what I mean? I have that awareness inside of me that at one point, I believe that, and maybe it's still like lingering around in me. But no, at my core, no. Like I think that's foolish, and it's also very unhelpful.
Yeah, yeah.
I even had I don't know how much you want to get into it, but I just had a brief conversation the other day with a previous podcast guest through text, just about the classifications of men, like from the animal world, right? Alphas, betas, sigmas.
Yeah.
I think that's ridiculous and it's unhelpful. We're not animals. You know what I mean? Like for someone to be classified, for me to be classified as an alpha, I could probably be an alpha in some situations. Like I'm definitely going to take charge if I feel that I can, if it's an area that I have experience within, and I can be very aggressive. I can be that, quick to take charge, quick to lead, quick to speak, be a little bit more aggressive. But I often find that I'm more comfortable playing like a strong second. I like when I was in Canmore at that startup.
Yeah.
Catch the idea of what we're doing and then just like making it work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I just don't think those categorizations are helpful.
No.
I don't think looking at what a man can produce is a helpful way of figuring out whether or not that's a good man. Because we need more good men. We don't need men that are just wealthy. We don't need more men that have more property or more skills. We need more good men or healthy men.
You know what word comes to mind? And this is something that comes out of my early days in the military. I did 9 years in the Navy. Decorum and deportment. And I'm going to mention a name that'll drive everyone crazy.
You're going to have to tell me about that because I'm betting there's other people that aren't quite sure on the
decorum and deportment would be, deportment is how you carry yourself, dress. It's basically the point you just said, good men. We need some more good men. We need respectful men.
Okay.
Right? And what I worry about in today's day and age, and I have two boys, I have a 21-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I want them to be good men. But I see, mostly in the political sphere, people that don't have the decorum that they should have. Frankly, I'm talking about Donald Trump. When he starts talking about groping women's genitalia and stuff like that, and then he becomes president, I can't believe that happened, frankly.
Yeah.
What I struggle with, if that is a person who's supposedly leading the free world, you know where I'm going with this now. How do you have good men if the role model is not very good?
Well, obviously it gets a little bit more challenging. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where I go. And I'm just trying to be a good man in front of my boys, particularly to my wife. I want them to know this is how you treat a woman with respect.
Yeah.
And I think, so far so good. I've been with her since 1995, and things are going well, but it's not easy in this world, with everything that's going around. How do people find you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, there's a few different ways, I suppose. I mean, theakkeri.com. So again, Akkeri, theakkeri.com is the website. And all the main bits can be found there. The choruses are in development, so they're not live yet. So on the website, you'll, see a few pictures of me from, starting back as young as probably 6, up till now. A little bit of information about who I am and where I come from and what the Akkeri is and why it exists. The podcast is linked there. So the podcast itself obviously is on all the major platforms, Apple, Spotify, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube are the socials that we focus on right now. It's the Akkeri on all 3 of those. But that's mainly it. If there was like an ask for people right now, it would be to check out the podcast and share that.
Yep.
That's really it. See if the conversations that we're having resonate with you, and share that with whoever, really, because I've found that, I mean, there's women that listen to the Akkeri. I don't think it's going to be something that only men are going to listen to. Something directed at men, and conversations with men are obviously going to be of interest to women, and they can learn more about us, hopefully. But yeah, I would love to see that grow, because I'm enjoying the conversations I'm having there. And I think even the fact that men are having serious, intellectual, spiritually deep conversations that are filled just with like moments of vulnerability and the courage that it takes to be that vulnerable in that context when it's going to go live, you know what I mean? And there's not really any takebacks. I mean, you could take it down, I suppose, if you want to. But
if you do live podcasts, is that what you're doing?
No, it's not live. They're recorded,
Yeah.
but we don't, like, I'm not really editing them for content.
Yeah.
Like, if there's weird noises in the background, long pauses, anything like that, I'll cut out.
Yeah.
But content, no.
Yeah.
It's basically.
I don't even cut out the weird put noises and long pauses.
Oh yeah, well, I think I smoked this like 5 minutes ago. I'm not
But you
sure.
hit it, did you?
I think so.
It's funny when people are not that familiar with mics and stuff, and they start articulating and banging.
I should be. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm used to a lapel here,
Yeah.
or like a countryman
Yeah.
coming over here. But I'm pretty sure I just smoked it. Yeah.
So yeah, when we met, you were thinking about starting. You knew you were going to. You hadn't actually done any.
Was it that long ago?
I'm pretty certain.
That would have been like spring.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
So how many episodes are you up to now?
Ooh, that was a great question. 8?
Yeah.
I think I just published 8. And there's none waiting to be edited right now, but there's 2 more lined up to record. So yeah, I'm going to keep going. I mean, it is,
Yeah.
we chatted about it before we hit record. Like it's a fair bit of work.
Yeah.
To line up the guests and make sure they're comfortable, and we've got like a solid topic to dig into, and then the editing itself, just make sure all the levels are correct and the quality's where I want it to be, getting all your thumbnails right. I mean, it's a bit of work, but like for the most part, I'm enjoying it. The main part, obviously, that I enjoy is the conversations, digging into like real shit, right?
Yeah.
Like when guys get on there. And I give them all a heads up, so if anybody's thinking about being a guest, oh yeah, you could do that. I think the link is theakkeri.com/podcast-intake, I think. But there's a link on the site if anybody would want to be a guest. But that's the part that I love the most, right now, is having those conversations where the men are willing to be vulnerable and dig into, or let me guide them really, to dig into something. Because I just had the most recent episode was with a friend of mine, Todd Tremblett, talking about his experience growing up in the Pentecostal church, leaving that, similar to my own experience, but as a bit of a progression, bit of a walk out of it over time. And now he's an agnostic atheist. That isn't my experience exactly, but the vulnerability, the courage that it took for him to talk about that so openly.
Yeah.
Right. And Stephen Randall, past guest, who's an author. I believe the book is called My Child, the Addict. It has a subtitle that I can't remember, but
I have it here somewhere.
No way.
He was on my podcast a month ago.
Yeah, so it's like Steve, I only met him maybe a few months before we had that chat, but just so authentic,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
genuine, just talking about his heartbreak
Yeah.
at losing his son to drug addiction at a young age and what that was like for him. His first experience of telling his therapist that he was sad. No, his therapist told him that he was sad because he hadn't even been used to using that like terminology, the language of, feeling and emotion at that point in his life. And that's real. You know what I mean? I die for that, right?
Steve, I've known Steve a long time, and we were supposed to have a meeting with him on a Monday, and his son passed away that weekend, and
No way.
my heart went out to him. That was very tough. Actually, tomorrow, I'm interviewing Andy Jones down at the LSPU Hall.
Okay.
His play is all about the loss of his son, and tough topic, but I'm looking forward to delving into it.
Yeah.
You know, Matt, what I tell you, I remember specifically at the alt, I was sitting there and I had an extra monitor, and you said to me, "Do you like that monitor?"
Yeah, that
It's,
was
you know what's interesting about life?
gear.
And
Yeah.
my boys are, they always say, "Oh, Dad, man, you talk to too many people." But I just find people interesting, and I particularly like the alt because there's so many people down there.
Yeah,
And I'm going to say this to you, if you didn't say something to me, then there's times when I respect, and I won't say anything, and I'm kind of into my thing. But the moment someone opens up to me, the only problem with that is that, oh dear God, here he goes. Is he ever going to stop talking? But I just find new people
I'm like that too, though.
so interesting,
Yeah, and we're both like kind of like gearheads, right?
Yeah.
Both techies, and I was interested in it was an Asus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a secondary screen
I've
that I had looked at
since
before.
Smashed it, unfortunately. I had to buy another one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, $400. I'll never
Yeah,
get back.
I mean,
but
you dove into talking to me about the podcast and the recent camera you purchased, and I find all that interesting. But honestly, I find authentic people interesting. That's it. I feel like I read people probably all too well sometimes, and I think that is just a symptom of growing up the way that I did. The oldest of four to a single mother, I had a lot of time on my own and had to figure things out. So I naturally, is it nurture, is it nature? Maybe it's both for on that point, but I was very intuitive.
Yeah.
Right. And if someone's going to be real with me, I can sit there and chat with you for a very long time and I will feel energized by that. But in the first, 10 seconds or so, if I feel like it's not authentic and, you're maybe having just an off day, right? I can have grace for that. But if there's people, I just don't have a lot of time for a lack of authenticity and trying to be something that you're not. And it's not worth it.
I'm going to say this to you, you're eight episodes in, and knowing the heavy lift that you've started, what I will say to you, it becomes addictive because what I find I struggle with sometimes is that we will record so many. Like I think I've got at least 9 recorded episodes right now. That means I could kind of sit back on my laurels and not necessarily have a chat and record with someone.
Yeah.
Here's what you'll find, and this may resonate with you in the future as you get more under your belt. The addiction, I'll call it, of sitting with someone and knowing that the conversation you're recording could potentially help someone. That's where we are with this. And then if I have a window where I've got a bunch recorded and I don't need to sit with anyone, then I'm like, maybe I should do 2 episodes a week or 3,
Yeah.
I mean, we have the ability to, as I said to you, in our business, we released 70 interviews in 5 days.
Yeah, that's wild.
That's insane. I mean, not many people in the world are doing that. But my point being is that kudos to you for getting this bloody thing started. It's a Herculean task, frankly, to get it moving. Especially when, even for me, I mean, I have all this experience. I shot wedding videos since the 80s. Putting this together has been an evolution, and it continues to be a heavy lift. This is not a walk in the park. I can assure you. Even tonight, as I sat down here using new microphones, I didn't want to have the blocks. I wanted to use the lapels, and one of them wouldn't work, and that drives me bananas. Like, that should bloody well work.
I
right?
feel you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's exactly what I say. Man, this should work. Like, what's happening, right?
Well, I mean, when you think
Gotta
about
go
it,
for a
it's a
walk.
little thing that screws in there, there's not much that can
Pretty
go
simple
wrong, right?
sometimes. Yeah.
But who knows? Static
tech-
electricity or something? Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I feel you're preaching to the choir. Yeah.
So I'm going to say this to you. We often ask, not often, we always ask our guests to give a piece of advice. If you're talking to some gentleman out there who's struggling with anything, be it, whatever. I mean, from the absolute worst case scenario to some minor thing, what would be a piece of advice that you would give?
I think one of the most helpful things that I could probably say to them is that vulnerability is more of a strength than you might realize. And I think the world can really open up to you if you learn how to be vulnerable in the right time and place and in the right way. I mean, I spoke to you, met you at a cafe, and, I had a sense that this guy was the real deal. And then, you offered to have me on here, and I'm like, okay, I trust this guy. I would open up to you and share the story and trust that, you're not going to use it in any way that would, change the content or any, you know what I'm saying, right? But there's time and place to open up about whatever it is that you're going through. But we have to realize as men that vulnerability is not weakness. It is a strength. It is courage. It takes courage to be vulnerable, and you cannot be real. You cannot establish real connection with people without vulnerability. And we all need that.
Yeah.
Despite what society tells us that, the alpha male, the lone wolf, like that's the ideal, that's not. That's wrong. That's come from movies, that's come from books that were completely misguided, that thought they were the right idea at the time and healthy and strong and whatever that was. That's not helpful. That's not healthy. It's not going to bring you to a place in life where you're, I think, really satisfied. So no matter what it is that this man that I'm speaking to right now is going through, realizing that vulnerability is strength, I think that can be really helpful. Time and place, context, that matters. You're not going to just be spilling everything to everybody.
No.
But you have your people.
Yeah.
The buddy that I mentioned earlier, John Hilliard, he made a comment on his podcast when he had me on that I keep my circle tight. And I'm like, well, yeah, there's a couple people in my life who know just about everything. When I went through divorce, what happened there, because I needed to tell somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I needed to have someone go through that with me because that was heavy. Have someone carry that with me because that was heavy. When I was not wanting to live anymore, I needed to have someone who heard that story, who heard those thoughts, who could carry those heavy emotions with me, because it was too much to carry on your own, and you shouldn't have to carry it on your own. And doing so for an extended period of time is detrimental.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, vulnerability is strength, takes courage. But you choose the right time, place, context, the right people. I think you'll realize that if you don't think it's strength now, you'll think it's strength then.
Well, folks, this has been a Gale Force Wins episode. And as we've discussed, this came out of a conversation down at a hotel lobby. And that's what life's all about. You meet people and you get to share experiences. And I know that, Alan and I have created a podcast that's centered primarily around business, but boy, there's a whole host of other things that need to be discussed. And what I have sitting here with me is an expert, been through it, and now he's starting out on a journey, a passion project, he said, the Akkeri. The
Akkeri.
The Akkeri. The Akkeri.
That's happened more than once, yeah.
The Akkeri. The anchor. Thanks, folks, for joining us. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.